Okay, we're going to start the part 6 of the Affinity Designer Basic series, and in this area we're going to be covering the studio area under view. Now you notice some of these areas are ticked, and when it's ticked it will appear visible in the control panels here on the sides. And also what we're going to do is talk about these tools on the side. So it's a lot to cover, so let's get started with it. Just a preamble is to say that quite a few of these things we have mentioned in previous videos of the series, talking about the glyph browser, talking about paragraph settings. So those ones we're not going to go and repeat now. So if I come under this area, I just want to see which ones we have dealt with already. I'm not going to do 32 preview bit because that's just a screen setting. So we go down here, that will leave. Character, we've done that already. Constraints, we've done. Effects is this effect area. When you click here, it's the same thing that pops up. So we've covered that already. So let's just go through. Glyphs we've covered. History we've also covered, but I'm leaving that checked because I might need to use it while I'm showing the other tools when I want to have a history to undo. Isometric, we'll keep that. Layers, we always need to work with that. Navigator is really it's a little dialog window. I'll leave that so I can show it. Paragraph, we've covered that under the text area, the video we did there. Swatches, we will do that. Snapshots I'll do. Stroke is very integral in everything we do. You'll see us fiddling with that. Styles, there is text styles, which we did cover, and the other object styles, I think I'll leave that so we can cover that, and symbols. And then transform is pretty much something that you'll have open on your panels. Then hide studio is literally, if I click that, we hide all the studio bar areas. And let's get back there and just uncheck that. Okay, so we get that back, and then at the end I'll show you that we can do a reset to the factory defaults. And what you're seeing now at the moment is my preferred setup. You'll see my layers is on the left here, not on the right. And I'll show you when we do a factory default how it shifts back to where you start off everything when you start totally brand new. So let's maybe go through this first, and then we'll hit on to all the tools. Okay, so instead of me going down that menu every time, I will just call up or go through these areas on the side, because these are the studio areas that are open, and there's the few that are open on the side here. Remember, I have done, and there's a lot of people that have done videos that dig deep into the specific stuff. Like, for example, if we talk about assets, how to create the assets and everything, I'll try and just give you some sort of insight, but not spend too much time, else we'll be doing a very, very long video. Okay, so let's start off with color. With your color area, this is where you'd pull off color of objects. So I'm going to just throw an object onto the screen. This area here, these little circles, this would be the border color, and it has a thickness to it, and the border is often referred to as a stroke. So we'll have to allocate a thickness of the stroke, but that's the color of it. This little area with a line through it is transparency. So when we click on this, whichever thing is on top will get transparency. So if I click here, this is the fill color, it will gain transparency when I click on there. So if I go and I make that red, it's because this thing is on top. If I do that and I change the color, you'll see the outline changes that color. So whichever is in front. This is in front, so if I click on the transparent here now, it will make the border transparent. So there's zero stroke on the outside. Okay, so this is what this interface works with. You'll notice as I'm clicking here, it's got the same dialog over here, and this is used to keep it while we're busy working with strokes here and pen tools. We have that color dialog pop out easier. But this one on the right that I'm speaking about is a bit more intense with its abilities to tweak certain stuff. So if we look next to it, there's a little dot here. Now this comes from this eyedropper. The difference between this eyedropper and the one we'll cover here on the left hand side, this eyedropper, is that this eyedropper on the left would take color from the working area. It's not able to work outside the working area, whereas this one can take a color from inside the working area or outside, and they function a bit differently. This one, you don't click and let go. If I click and let go here, it will make this little dot gray because it's selecting this area right on this window. So I've got to left mouse button down and move it to where I want to make a selection. Let me show you. Left mouse button down as I click, and as I drag, it shows me what's under. So I'm able to go right out the window anywhere and choose a color. Maybe I want to choose this blue on top here. You see the magnification. Then when I let go, this dot changes blue. Now the area I selected doesn't automatically change blue. This becomes a placeholder. If I want to change this now, I would click this and it would transfer it into that area. Same thing if I go to the border here, I could go and let me say I'm going to select maybe this gray color here and let go. You can't actually even see it because it's the same like the background, but I'm going to kick the background color now into this border area. I'll click there and you see it will take on that. Okay, if I drag here and get a white here, get the border forward. So you can see that this is a kind of placeholder, but samples from anywhere on the screen or even on a second screen. Okay, this color wheel, if I'm now selecting the fill color, whenever I move around here, it real-time updates. I can also, if I click on this little dialog box that pops down here, I can choose other options of how it has to display, whether in a slider, so it displays in a different sets and different sliders. So that's your choice. Mine, I use the wheel all the time, or most of the time, but you can go through those and see which will suit you. Here to the left side at the bottom, it's showing, this is a hue, saturation and luminance wheel. It's showing you the settings there. And then whichever color you're choosing, this is your opacity of that color layer. And then interesting here where it says opacity, if you click on here, you switch in between opacity and noise. So if I click there, it now becomes a noise slider. And when I slide it up now, if you look closer, you can see this digital noise coming into this place. And as I move it away. So the slider for opacity is the same as the slider for noise. You just click on this area. Okay, so that roughly covers that area. Let's go to stroke. At the moment, the stroke is 0.2, which is the outline. So if we go to color, we see the color that we chose with the stroke is black. So that's okay. So it will be a nice contrast if we do this. Any settings. Now, the stroke style, this would be, there's no stroke. So if I do that, there's 0 stroke on the object that I've selected. If I go to a stroke, I can go to dash lines and I can go to texture lines on the stroke. So that would be, so the usual one is the normal line here, and this is the width. So when I make the width bigger, this is what happens. Okay, so vector objects are often an outline and a fill color. So here the outline is what we refer to as a stroke. Going down these areas here, these have different functions with strokes. To demonstrate how we would use these cap areas here, I'm going to just draw a line up there, and I'm going to have an area where we're going to have an angle because I want to demonstrate something, and we have an edge. If you look at this edge here, this is where it's indicated. You can see that's if you want to change the cap, which is the edge of the line, or if there's any line where you have a angle, this would affect there. You can see that area, or you could go a sharp angle, that could be a flat, or it could be rounded. So often in your designs, those are features that you can set up. Then the align tool would be, if you look at this here, this indicator line, the blue line is in the middle of the thickness, or this way and that way. Okay, so this is indicating that's what it looks like. Then this one is aligning the stroke to the inside and this to the outside. However, if you click this now, nothing is going to happen because this object doesn't know what the inside is and what the outside is. It's not closed. The inside might be on the left around and the outside here, or the outside and inside. So this align tool, these other two features only work when the object is totally closed. So for example, if I go to this object, which is a totally closed object, I can go and show you that line there. Now it's spread equally to the outside, and now it knows, because this object is closed, this is the inside. So if I do this, look what happens. That is the outside line, and it pops inside, and the counter is true. This is the line, and it pops to the outside. The default is this one, where it spreads equally. So as we thicken it, it will thicken to the outside and inside. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on these other things because there's lots of other goodies here. But just to explain that this one here, I'll cover this, which is scale. Scale with object, which means that if I don't click that and I size this object, you can see the outline becomes very thick when you get smaller, because the outline keeps its thickness. Whereas often you'd want to click that, and when you size it, it proportionately keeps the size based on the object. So it proportionately decreases the stroke with the object size. That is often crucial. A lot of people make requests to find out why their object is now, the border is getting so thick when they make it smaller. It's because that box is not checked. By default, it's not checked also. Okay, there's tutorials on speaking about strokes, which you can go watch. This is, like I said, just the basics. And then the last part that I want to show you here is this. So you have a thing that ends. You could go in and say that you've got to add a arrow at the end of this object, say there, and then at the end. Now, you'll see that it's showing the end this way and the start this way. That is often dependent on how you drew the object. But if you wanted to flip it around, you could click over here and it would swap the heads. But you're not seeing any difference because I'm using the same heads. So let me just choose a different one. So if I had to swap it around, that's what would happen. Okay, so that's the stroke panel. There's lots more to go with the stroke, the miter settings and everything. But go look at those videos that deal exclusively with explaining that. Let's get to swatch. Often if you're working with a design, I'm going to just go and get a photo. If I'm, for example, working with a photo like this, I can go to the swatch panel and I can create a swatch using this photo. So it's pretty much the top right corner again, that little drop down arrow. Create a palette from the document. Just make it available as a document palette, which means it's only available when you're working in this particular project. Okay, so say I wanted to take those things and utilize it. I can select that area and I'm going to say create a palette from the document. Okay, so I'm going to click and make it as a document palette, just relevant to this. When I click on it, it automatically goes out and gets all the color shades that are in here. Then your brushes, very interesting, and I have to jump over to the left panel here. There is a vector brush tool. Okay, now people who are used to using brushes will be used to using pixel-based brushes, and in Affinity there's two types of brushes. There's the vector brush and a pixel-based brush. And the difference is that vector brushes are able to be manipulated afterwards with nodes. Let me show you. If I come to a vector brush, and these brushes are here. So I'm going to choose this acrylic here, and let me, make this kind of big here. And as I draw it, you'll see there's the acrylic. And then, of course, I can go and change the color of the item. Can maybe, oops, that's not what I want. That's the full color, which is, because it's a vector, it still sees that as a stroke outline. So I've got to select stroke, and that's the color. So the nice thing here is if I go and press my shortcut key A for my node, I can manipulate it like I'd work with any bit of nodes. Okay, so that is vector. So if you want to design something with a vector brush, that you want to have a brush effect inside a logo, this would be the perfect thing to use. Now let me just show you. I'm going to jump over to the pixel persona and show you the difference between that and a paintbrush. Okay, the paintbrush, you also have your brushes here, but if I paint now with a paintbrush, you have this area. Now if I go and I go select, these paintbrushes are all flattened as pixels, whereas if I come here, you can see this is still a vector art. If I go back to Affinity Designer, this one I can still manipulate this brush, because it's a vector. However, this brush, I can't do anything. It's flattened. It's just the texture that I have, and then I can only do opacity and blend modes and that sort of thing. So let's go down here to the next ones. This is symbols. What symbols are is when you're working across multiple artboards. If you're creating artboards and you want to create one kind of symbol, like for example this, that when you modify it in other areas, it's going to modify all of them at the same time. So they keep characters, and then you can separate them so that the one doesn't affect the other. But let me show you quickly. So if I use this and I want to create a symbol, I'll click on symbol. You see it will put it in this area. So I could take this and literally move it there. So I can use it as another symbol. So if you're working with a symbol, it's double click, you engage it, and then you're able to do this, but you notice that all the other symbols will change along the way. Okay, so if I double click here and I start to size, all of them will size together. If I move them, they'll move. So what happens is a symbol links to all other symbols. So when I click off it and I decide to move it, that's independent. Now I'm going to take this one and I can change it like this. I'll rotate it. But as soon as I double click any of the ones that are symbols and I start to move them, they all will start moving or translating or rotating accordingly. Okay, even though they are modified differently. If I want this thing not to be affected when I touch the other stuff, I can come to that one and I can say detach. When I say detach, now if I come and double click here and I size, only those two will resize. So that's the power of creating symbols. You can synchronize them across artboards. Okay, here again, how to create all these styles. You literally develop and make all the settings of your effect styles, all your settings here, and then you can save it as a style like this, so that when you're selecting an object, you can go in and click the style and it will translate that particular style all over onto the objects. Okay, so this is a whole subject on its own. Just to know that you can create your own. You can also import style packs. You can create your own categories and export them out and share them with other people. But let me just show you one here that if you also use text, if you have text there, you can also use the styles. It will take the style and apply it to that. And that's often what's used is you're able to move the style over and then you're able to do some of the changes here. Now, these styles I have covered under the other videos. So just go back to those videos and have a look at how we can tweak them. But the styles palette, this is where it exists. Okay, then we also have here now the transform. And this is literally when you do modifications here. It's to transform the objects that you have selected, to do rotations and all that sort of stuff. So that if you use that a lot, you can keep that out. I often don't use that much, so sometimes I hide it. I go to the studio area and I uncheck that box. Same thing with navigator. If you don't use this kind of navigation often, you might not need to have it out here, but this is just giving you an overall view of your zooming in and your navigating of what's happening on the screen here. Then the next one is snapshots. This is actually quite powerful. It's like doing the history and the undo history, but it's more concise in going to an exact spot. So say, for example, I try this object here and I go, okay, this design look, I like this. And then you can go to snapshot and you say add snapshot. You can give a descriptor here. I'm going to just say like one. So I like it one. Whoops, the caps are not correct there. But then I can go and say, you know what, I need this one here. This one maybe there. This one I am going to bring it right forward. I like this as my second look. So although I can go to my history panel and move all the way back if I want to look at the other one, I can come here and create a second snapshot. So I go second snapshot, so I'll say sec. SCC for second snapshot. Now if I want to go and look back at the first one, I don't have to go through my history. I can just come here to the first one, and this little icon on the left is to restore the snapshot. So I'll click there, and then I can come here and restore it. So there I have the two snapshots that I work with. And that might be something that you want to do, because you might say, okay, I want to go back to that first snapshot and select it and copy it onto a new area. So I could go like Control C, come here and just say new from clipboard. So now I've created a new object from the clipboard, but as it relates there, and then I can come back and I can say, okay, I want to restore the first one. So I'm carrying on working here, but in the second one, I have that snapshot that I've allocated. So that would be how you could benefit from creating a snapshot. You can go to that setting, move it out of the space, because if I work only in this area and then I create a new snapshot, everything on this document is going to return to its exact position. The only way to really maintain what you've got after the snapshot is to move it off this document, as I've shown you. And then, of course, if you want to delete these, you first decide where you want to be. Say this is your second snapshot, so you're happy to be there. Now you can go in and delete these and just click the delete snapshot. Okay, so there's no more snapshots to go back on there now. Isometric is quite a bit of intense features that are on there. I'm going to just pull this one out, which you can undock anything. I'm going to click modify grid. There's nothing to do here because you haven't initiated the isometric yet. So to do it, you'll go modify grid. And at this stage, it's asking you what grid do you want to put on. And you've noticed here, all of a sudden, these three features pop up with other menus. What you're having to tell the system is, this is what my grid's going to be. It's going to have 10 millimeter spacing, divisions, etc., the gutter. And once you do that, it will then be able to implement this. And isometric is used often for infographics, when you want to create a 3D looking little boxes and little cars and that for infographics. You want to work alongside guidelines. So here you can come and you can click show the grid. We'll see the grid there. Also, if you want to modify the grid, you can come in and you can click automatic, basic, advanced, cube. If you click on cube, it gives you this cube that you can rotate it with the mouse. You can do this, turn it here, change the axis that you are working on. Let's see if we can change that axis. So whichever axis you are busy working on, you can modify it for the position of the cube. What it's doing is aligning the cube to the surface. Now I'm messed it up a bit here, so let's just see if we can get it back to press 0 there. So we've got the cube here, so it's lined up like this. Okay, so there's lots of things that you can set. The scale is the spaces in between that you want to work. So let's assume that's what makes you happy. When you close that, this is what you now have. It will create a grid based on the surface you're working. Now to edit the plane, I suggest you click here, else nothing will come on the screen. So we're going to create a top area. I'm going to create a rectangle, but look what happens is when I draw it, it draws it in that plane. Now you see it's not snapping to the grid because that you have to set in the snapping area, but it keeps this plane. Now if I want to go on the side, I'll click there, and when I draw, it will draw it as if it's on the side. If I go front, it will draw it on the front. So it keeps these planes depending on how you, I know I did a crazy plane setup now, but this is just to show you that once you set up your planes, you can use it to create these things. So how you'd modify it is that you'd be able to get it there, grab it. You'll notice that it sticks to those planes when you're working. So if we go up there, select. So now you can create this. Let me change this color. I'm just going to hide this grid. Okay, so let me just go in here, view, show grid, hide grid. So you can create these objects now, and as you're working, adding more things onto them, you'll find you can remove the grid, but the angles will still be the same if you have this out. When you're done, you can uncheck that box, and when you draw, it will just be on the normal 2D surface. But this isometric is to give you the ability to draw these 3D isometric views. The isometric views, they're not 3D perspective views. Let's just select these and delete it. Okay, we've done snapshots, we've done the isometric, and you see the isometric has disappeared now because I closed that box. I clicked on the X, but if you want it back, you can come to View, click on Studio, go down to Isometric, and there it pops exactly where I left it last. So let me just drag this down here again, under there. Okay, so here we're going to come here and we're getting close to finishing up these studio things. So the assets they appear to be similar to what we saw earlier on with the symbols. The fact that you could drag a symbol out here, you could take a asset and drag it out, and this is a vector art. Now, there is a difference between a symbol. Here you can't link. If I take one of these and I do this now, I take this object and I size it, it's not going to do anything to the other. There's no links between them. There's no intelligence between them like with symbols. They interact with each other. Here you're just having an object that you're putting in. It's like a placeholder of, mostly people will create icons in here, vector icons, and then it's easy to come and drag objects through onto it and then size it accordingly. In the same way, you could come and say you were going to do a object like this. You could come into this area. As you notice here, there's a lot of pop-down menus. I'm going to just go here and say collapse. Is there a collapse button? Collapse all. Okay, there we go. So this is a lot of subcategories. In miscellaneous, we have a lot of them. And you can create your own. So you'll come in, you'll create a category, you will then put a subcategory in, and then you'll design your vector art and you can drag it in there. So things that you use often, like for example, if someone's doing a user interface, they can use this that comes with Affinity, this asset. You can drag it on there, and there you have a button. So you don't have to go design all of this stuff. But like I mentioned to you that if you, let's open miscellaneous. In miscellaneous, if I wanted to use this object and change it, well, let me just leave it like that, but it's shaped this way. What I can do is I select it here, I go into this category area, and I can come in here and I say add from the selection. So it will add what selection I've made. If I click that, notice what happens. It places it down here as an additional object. And then of course this becomes part of my miscellaneous. So if I want to create that again, I can just drag that out and I'll have it. Or if I want to remove it there, I can right click on that and say delete that asset. Okay, it's very valuable to create assets that you use often. And in this case here, you see this iOS 12 has been supplied by Affinity Designer, and it's for most of the user interfaces, like you creating a UI. You don't have to go do all of this. This is set up as an asset for you. Okay, so that's with assets. You can create your own. You can import assets from other people. It's literally there, that little block on top, and then you can go and say import assets or export assets. There is a session that I've done on how to create your own assets. You can go look at that. It's on my channel somewhere. Okay, history. I'm coming back to appearance and layers now. But history is the undo history. You literally can take it back right through the history. The other thing is, and I've covered this already in the first part, was that if you save this document, you can decide to save this entire history with the document. So somebody who comes in with this document can go back in history and undo a lot of stuff here. So that is a very powerful tool. It also has, if you look at this here, it says cycle future. It has the ability, when you get to a certain point, you can cycle out of the undo but still not lose everything. It has a bit of intricacies, but that's for an intermediate or an advanced video series. Now appearance, let me just show you something that I think will excite you. So on this layer, I am going to just create this cog. I'll get to these and show you how that all works, but let me show you now. If I've got a cog like this, I am going to choose a transparent full color, and the outline, let me just choose it as black, and I'm going to make the stroke kind of thick. You notice these edges are rounded off here. I didn't cover this, but if you want it to be sharp, you just up this to about 4 or 5, the mitre, and it will sharpen off those edges. But this object that I've got on here now is, we'll get to this part when I get to this menu after this discussion now. This is what I call a parametric object. It's got other little handles that you can go on here, but I'm not going to entertain that now. I want to just show you this appearance. So if I wanted to create an object something like this, okay, so I make that maybe thick, and then I go Control J. I'm creating another duplicate on top, and I'm going to change the outline color to maybe red. So now we have a cog on top of this one that's red, and the one at the bottom is black. So I'm going to make the stroke slightly thinner. Okay, so you see where I'm going to with this. Then I'm doing the next cog, Control J, and I'm going to make the color maybe green, and make that a bit thinner so that we can have multiple colors. Okay, so what we have here is black, then there's red, and then there's green. So I had to create 3 cogs to do that. Now, if I wanted to do this exact same thing, couldn't I just use one object and, you know, do some magic with it? And that's exactly what the appearance gives you. The appearance gives you the ability to add multiple strokes onto the same object, or multiple fills onto the same object. So you become more conservative in how you actually use different objects. So I'm going to select these 2 and just delete it. I come to the cog. This is the start off point, but if I go to appearance, appearance will show me here is an outline stroke and the fill. Okay, there's nothing at the fill, which this corresponds to, this on the side corresponds to the color palette here. All of these things are the same. But look at this interesting thing here. In the stroke area, if I click there, this dialog box is the same that pops up when I'm here with stroke on the side. Very interesting. But on this dialog box, I can narrow the stroke, I can make it broad, I can still do all of these settings. It's exact same pop out that I have with the stroke there. But look at this here now. I can go, if I go down to the bottom here, something interesting here. In this appearance area, there's add stroke and add fill. That means I can add multiple fills on top of each other in the same object, and multiple strokes. Let me just show you the power of it. I'm just going to show you the stroke one. If I click stroke, it's going to put one on top of that, and it defaults into transparent. So if this stroke is a duplicate of that one, but it is at 0 points, so it's got 0 thickness. It's also got a blend mode. Very interesting. It's got a blend mode on the stroke, same as the fill has blend mode. So this is, I haven't seen it in any other graphics programs, and I don't think many people know this exists. So I'm going to change this stroke to a different color. I'm going to change it to red. Now we notice there's like a little red. It's just giving us indication there's something there, but it's given it a 0.2 points. That's why we're able to see some sort of red. So this is a red circle on top of this one. So if I click on the size and I increase the size, look what happens. There we're having the red. So this red is going to be slightly smaller than the other one. We're trying to mimic what I showed you just earlier. In this case, I'm going to put the mitre up so I can have a nice sharp edge also, because if the mitre's down, you're going to find these edges are going to be sort of rounded over there. Okay, so I've got that up. Now let me look what I have. I have a red stroke that's 4 points thick. The black stroke, which is at the bottom of it, is 11. So I'm going to put one now right at the bottom of the black. Maybe I should put a green one there. So I'm going to add a stroke. It puts it here, but I'm going to take it. Let's see, click off there. I'm going to take it there and drag it. Normal way, it's almost like layers. I'm going to drag it to the bottom underneath the black one. So now this one I'm going to make much thicker than 11, so it's going to peek out on the bottom here and top here. So let me make that a nice green. And now I'm going to click on the size, and you'll see nothing happening until it reaches past 11, and you're going to start seeing it peek out. Isn't that incredible? So now you can see the mitre needs to be sharpened there. So I can do that. So now I've got those 3 strokes there, and they are all linked into the one document. If I go back to the layer, it's the one cog. Same thing will apply here, that if I go to the appearance, if I'm working on these points, I must just make sure that I say scale to object. Remember what I said earlier about scale to object? You want to make sure that it's scaled to object, because when you do scale the overall thing, you don't find the stroke behaving strangely. So if I say scale to object, all three of them are going to scale to object. So now when I size it, they all keep their proportionate sizes because they are outlines that are scaling to the size of the object. So let's go to the tool palette over here. This is the move tool, which you can get on a shortcut. So if you are in another tool, let's say you're in the gradient tool, you can press the key V and that will shift you over to the move tool. You then select the object and move it there. That's pretty much what happens. If you want to copy something and constrain it, you can use modifying keys. So I can use the move tool. I keep control down and the left mouse button I press and then I pull out. It's now creating a copy for me. Okay. If I want to constrain it, that I don't want it going up or down, I can, at the same time of pressing control, I press shift. It will constrain it. Then before I let go of my keys on the keyboard, I let go of the mouse and it will keep it there. So if I go there, select, control, shift, alt. If I let go of the keys, the previous one will just disappear. Okay, so it's important to know that with the move tool. So let's go through it again. If I want to duplicate one here, I'll press control, pull it out. But if I let go of the keyboard, the control button, while I'm keeping the mouse down, the first one is going to disappear. Okay, so it's just then considering me moving the thing. But if I want to duplicate it, I go control, grab it, move it. I can have the modifying key to constrain it. And then before I let go of the keyboard, I let go of the mouse. It then places, then I can release the keyboard. Okay, so the move tool works differently based on what keys you are pressing at the time. Okay, let me just delete that. Here we come on to the Artboard tool. I did cover it on a few occasions, but the Artboard tool is there when you're not working on a single document, and I have covered the purpose of artboards for designing different layouts for user interfaces. You can have artboards of different sizes on the screen at the same time. But this tool works in three different ways, I can say. The first one is if you've got, or the one that's more common is when you click here, it pops up a dialog box and then you can just say insert artboard, but it's referencing what you are saying it must insert the artboard as. It's saying insert an artboard as the document that you have open here. So if I click insert artboard, this document is going to change into an artboard. If I click there we have an artboard now. Okay, I'm going to go Control Z. If I go and I click here and I say create, and this is the second way, create an artboard based on the selection, I can click there. If I go insert artboard, it's using that selection as its preference. And if I click, it now created an artboard only from that selection. And of course I can modify the artboard after that, size it and so forth. I go Control Z just to get the last way. Would be after you click this, you can left mouse button, keep it down and drag. As I drag it, I let go. That creates an artboard for me. Okay, Control Z. But once you have an artboard, say I draw this, once I have an artboard, if I draw again, it's just going to add the second one. Okay, so the first artboard you draw is always will have all the abilities to transform if you're in a document. But if you have an artboard already, then these things function slightly different, because now I can draw an artboard here, I can draw just about anywhere. Okay, so that's the artboard. I'm going Control Z, getting back to that state. So let's get to the pen tool. Now, pen tool is used in most vector editing softwares, and I'm not going to cover all the features of the pen tool. Just enough to know that when the pen tool comes out, when I click on an object, the context menu changes. Now, if you look at this here, you're seeing some incredible features here. I will cover explaining a bit more of these when I start utilizing the nodes, because the pen tool will create a object, a line, whether it's straight or curved, depending on how you press your control keys, the modifying keys. But then once you let go of it, it will construct that actual pen structure that you put down in the format of nodes. It will have a node connected to each other. Let me show you. I'm going to click, and then I let go and I click here, it puts a straight line. If I click and hold down and then turn, it will join the two but create little handles that are on the area. So let's go to pencil tool. This is more free flowing. Now there's interesting things up here. If I switch off the stabilizer, it will operate like any other pencil tool in a vector program. So pen tool and a pencil tool kind of operates a bit differently. Okay, so as I've drawn out this area, you notice that it's now got a whole lot of nodes in. So this is free drawing that happens along the way. It's a free hand setup. However, there's this beautiful settings that you have here with Affinity Designer, which is a stabilizer. When you click that, it gives you the ability to add a rope in front of this to smoothen your movements. Let me show you there. Can you see that little rope? Now I'm going to just thicken the stroke a bit so we can see it a little bit more better. So if I do that, you can see this rope following nicely. And then I can increase the length of the rope. I'm scrolling with my mouse button, middle mouse. I can increase the distance. Can you see it's almost like it's hanging on there and it doesn't move the stroke until I get to that extension of it. And you can get some nice shapes around there. Okay, so these are the additional tools that are out there. And then you have other modes, you have sculpt modes and everything. But again, when you see the videos on this particular tool, you'll get excited about it. Just that you know that it does exist and that you don't see the pencil tool just as a, you know, if I can call it old school, this kind of pencil environment. So now we go to the node. Now there's tutorials on the node tool, entire videos on it. So I'm going to try and be surface level, but just understand there's lots more to it. So let me click on the node tool. What the node tool does is it says that you are now able to engage with the nodes and you're able to engage with the stroke. Okay, so if we look at this area here, if I hover over the stroke, you'll see there's a little line that appears. If I go over the node, I can grab with my left mouse button and move the node. I can move these nodes. And also when I'm busy working with the nodes, look at all of these features on top here. For example, here, if I wanted to change this node, not from a curved node, I'm going to grab the handle. Not from a curved node, I want to have it as a sharp one. I'll select that and click there and you'll see it will turn into a sharp node over there. Okay, if I want it to be a rounded node, I can click there again and then it gets back there. And then when I modify, I can have modification keys kept down when I'm busy tweaking these nodes. For example, here if I go onto the handle, both handles are moving. If I keep Alt down, only one handle moves at a time. So there's a lot of modifications, just enough to know that the node tool is what is able to collect these nodes, to grab these nodes and to do their modification. The very powerful thing is, which most other programs don't have, is if you hover over the stroke and you don't click and let go, you just push the mouse button down and you drag, you're able to drag out the stroke beautifully. So this happens if you're like working here, you can select the object and you can grab there and modify it like this. This is really, really intuitive. I have the node tool and included with it is a point transform. But let me show you the point transform tool. If I select that, what that means is there's a point around which this object will rotate and size. So if I move this over here and then I grab this object, it will rotate around that and size. Then you have the corner tool, very powerful tool. If I have an object like this, if I want to use the corner tool, now this is C, and the node tool is A, so that's a good two shortcuts to learn. A for node tool, C for corner tool. Now with a corner tool, what happens is if I have a, let me just put this like this, if I have a section like this and I have a corner, okay, I can select that node, but if I do this, nothing's going to happen except the node is going to move. So if I want that to be treated as a corner tool, I can press C, or I can come and click over here on corner tool. I'm going to just press C. But before I press C, if I hover over here, maybe let me change this line so you can see it better to maybe a lighter color. Okay, so if I hover over here, you'll see that little that turns black. And if I go over the line, the tilde comes for me to be able to move the line. And when I hover there, it shows me it turns black to know that I can move the node. But if I press C, which is the curve, you'll see if I hover over there, you'll see there's a little small curve at the bottom. And that's because it's going to change this node into a curve. So as I do that, it follows the curve. This is a very powerful tool. If you notice up in the context bar, you'll see here, if I do now grab there and move, you can see the radius changing. Or I could hover over here and move my middle mouse, scroll my mouse, and it will be able to do precision areas. I also have the ability to change the corner shapes if I choose to do so, but I usually use the default curve that's on there. Let's go to the next one, which is the vector brush. I think I have shown you in the previous video when we spoke about brushes, we did cover the vector brush. This is a gradient tool, and most vector programs have it. You select the object, you click fill gradient. It will use whichever colors in there to start the gradient and add a darker and a lighter version. So then you left mouse button down and you click here. And what is nice here is you can go up to the top and choose in the context bar the type of gradient. You can here reverse the gradient. So if it's dark here and light there, you know, some people will take this, move it there, and take this and move it down at the bottom. So they'll kind of do this setup. But if you're there and you want to reverse that gradient, you just come to the context bar and you click here and it will flip it around for you. If you want to edit that gradient, you can click in here and do this setup. This is, if people are used to Photoshop, this is how they work. However, here it is more convenient to work in the gradient, where you go and you'll click an area, change whichever color, and you can click and drag these nodes accordingly and create your gradient based on that. Once you click off the area and say you want to get back to the gradient, if you click back on here, the gradient will appear. But if you're off this area and you press V, maybe get back to the move tool, and you come back here and you want to access the gradient, what you've got to do is select the object and just go and press the gradient again, or press G, which is the shortcut key, and the gradient will appear again. So you can reset the gradient and all the different types there. Okay, then in addition to the gradient, there is a lovely tool, which is the transparency tool. It is really great in certain instances. Let me show you. I'm going to fill the color with a yellow color, and let me get the outline to be transparent. And I'll just tuck it underneath this object. Okay, and then this one I'm going to push to the back. So I'll use that back one, or maybe push it right to the back. So that specific yellow object rectangle is behind here. The reason I'm putting it there is so that I show you that if I select this object and choose transparency, I'm going to draw it like a gradient also. Now you can see, can you see that gradient? If I go, so remember this is like a mask, it will go black to white is how the gradient gets created. So that's the gradient showing, and what you're seeing through here is transparent area. I want to go to place image tool. Now you can go to the menu and go say place here, or you just click place image tool and you select the object that you want to and you place it. Okay, just important to note that the place tool can open up an image and you can open up another vector object. But if you have a Affinity Designer file that you saved as Affinity Designer file, you can also place it here. But when you want to open it, you double click on it and it will open up in a separate document. Let me just show you that. So if I go and I place, so I'm going to place this file. It comes up as a placement also. So there I've got that. Now here I can't really modify it at this stage except size it and rotate it. But if I want to edit this, because it is an Affinity file, I double click on it. It will open it up in a separate window and I can modify it here. Let me just undock this window and show you that this keeps a live feed between these two. So if I want to modify this color area here and I change it, you see it changing real time in this other window, because this is an embedded document. Okay, I'm going to go Control Z. Let me just close this off. If you look here where I'm selecting object, if you look here, you'll see it's embedded document. Okay, the next one we come to is the vector crop tool. And that is when you select, you can crop the area as per usual. You also have the ability to move the crop window, so you can move the entire crop window. You then also have the ability, if you click onto the object inside, you can move it, and everything works together for cropping. So like I said, if you select that area, you can use that as a crop. If you click onto the object you're cropping, you can shift it around inside there. So it's a really different approach to cropping when you're working with the Affinity Design and this tool. Okay, I have covered the artistic text and artistic frame in the video, was it video 3, talking all about the text, so I'm not going to really cover that. The zoom tool also is just click magnifying glass and zoom. I have created a zoom tool that will get this canvas zoom to my full working position. So I got a shortcut Z, it just brings it to center. So if I have it there, I press Z, and it's the same thing that I have for the zoom tool. I didn't change it. So if I click there, I can run zoom in, or I press Z and it will just center for me. So the Z on my keyboard is a shortcut key I created. Okay, then the color picker, in comparison to the last one we spoke about, where you're able to grab it and drag it to a space and let go, and then it places it in a placeholder. The difference here is that if you, for example, selecting, say, this area, you can click on here, you click and let go, and then it gives you this little selection area. But you notice if I go off the working area, there's nothing that happens. When I come back on, then the selection gets live. Whereas with this one, the difference was you don't let go of it, you drag it and keep dragging it to make a selection, and can select anywhere. So if I come here now, and I'm going to first just go, I selected this area, selected there, and now when I click here, this object I selected previously will take this color. Okay, so that's how this particular eyedropper or picker works. Go Control Z. I'm just going to close this window because that was an embedded document that I opened up there. Okay, then now we come to these ones, and finally we're reaching the final stretch. These are, like I said, Boolean shapes, which is, this is an ellipse, so when you throw the ellipse on here, that's how the ellipse appears. There is a border color and a fill color, and I use this dialog here to edit most of the time. So there we have this ellipse. If we want to edit it with nodes, of course we have to convert it to curves as explained previously. Then we have the donut tool. When we bring that out, interesting with the donut tool and pretty much all the ones that appear under this one that's got a little pop-out window, all of these are active, have active modifiers with them, which is these little red dots on them. And look at what this does. If you move on them, they react quite different. They've got these parametric things that are attached to them. And once you're happy with where you're going to with it, you then can convert this to curves, and then you get nodes on the edges to work with, as per normal, as I explained before. So you still have in the context bar convert to curves. But you notice that all these little red areas, the context bar, have a lot of things depending on what structure it is now. So you can say close the pie, okay, or you can go and open it. You can say invert angles. You can toggle the angles. You can do all of these settings parametrically over here. And when you're totally happy, if you're not going to do any of these modifications in future, you convert to curves. If you want to keep this object, if you want to keep it like this, you don't have to convert to curves. You can build up your structures using these, and it gives you quite a bit of powerful manipulation. Once again, I say those people who work with 3D will know what I'm saying when I talk about parametric objects. Let's pull a few more of these out. I know the spy tool is one of these parametrics. So technically, you could only have the rectangle and the ellipse, which is kind of the normal structures, this and the ellipse. And everything else, I've put these two over here, but these two could actually be taken out here, and everything else exists in this drop down. So if I take the star tool and I put it here, you'll see there'll be some red dots. If I grab the red dots, I can modify, pulling it in different directions. these red dots will have lots of other meanings to them. Okay, you see this one, tweaks in there. This one operates differently. So experiment with them. They're extremely, extremely powerful. So let me show you quickly how I will use something. If I wanted to, let me just clear all of this, delete that. Let's say I wanted to make an area that's got various colors around. So I keep shift down when I draw it out so it constrains it. So I want to create a pie like this, but it must have 3 different colors. Then for me, I'd go there. I can do this. I'm going to go Control J. I'm going to duplicate one. Okay, and then I'll just rotate around there. Okay, let me just do that, and Control J, create another one, and just rotate that. So I've got 3 over there, and then what I can do is go on to this particular area. Let me go on to the donut. Let me see which one am I working on so that I can see them nicely. So we'll click there. Okay, so say these were the 3 donuts that I want to represent. I'm going to just take the stroke and make it a little bit less intrusive, a bit smaller. But say these were going to be things I was going to do with a pie chart. I could do something like this. This is just showing you one of the uses or workarounds with it. And then I could change the colors of these things. Okay, so you know, this is not the ideal way, because I need to create edges and that sort of thing. But for example, here now I could go and say that is that sample and that is that sample. I can speak to that. And if I go like, oh, you know what, I think we need to change the sample amount, I can do that, because this is still parametric. So this is where it can be used when you're doing diagrams and that sort of stuff. Okay, so go and experiment in all of these areas. Really powerful. And my last one I want to give you and show you here is the crescent tool, so you can see how the crescent tool can be used, thinking a bit out of the box. If I use this area, I'm going to keep the shift down so I constrain it and maybe create that object, maybe that color. I'm going to use that crescent tool now. So I'll go in, go get the crescent tool, and then I just draw a crescent and I drop, make sure the border is transparent, and I'll drop white color in it. So now I've got white color in it. Okay, let me rotate it there. So look here, this looks very dull. Okay, but just look what you do is when you create a nice crescent tool. And of course, if I go to the node tool, I have access to these crescent handles still. If I want to convert it to curves, then I can create tons more nodes on to finer manipulate. But I'm happy with this. Now, to make this look realistic like a shiny ball, remember we went through the transparency tool. Let me show you how I use that. Click on that, and I have this selected, this crescent, and then I draw that area out, and there we go. So I can take that and move it maybe there, and just nudge that a little bit. Okay, and there you go from having a very dull object, and if I hide this object, you see it looks just like a flat thing. If I add that on, it adds a nice shine. So there we've used the crescent tool, which is one of these parametrics. We've used one of these tools, and I've used the transparency to pull it out there. Okay, so that's how you kind of use the tools and pull them together. It's always good that when you're watching somebody use tools and use it in a project, is to learn one specific tool they're using, become efficient at it, and then build up your arsenal of how all these tools fit together. So hopefully this series of videos on Affinity Designer Basics have not tired you out and exhausted you having to watch through these hours of videos, but at least it's like a once in a lifetime kind of viewing process, and then after that you start to hone on to the specifics. So have a fantastic day, and God bless.